know you're kind of a newcomer to the grocery business, but not to food culture. You were raised in a small town in France, in a fishing village, and I believe 3 generations of fishermen in your family.
Well, I wasn't destined to end up in Silicon Valley, clearly. I grew up in a very big, rambunctious Sicilian family where food was always at the center of everything we did. And so, it's kind of going back to my roots to go back into a food business.
I'm curious if growing up that way and, sort of walking around, with your grandfather through the fishing village, did it instill this sort of builder mentality?
Absolutely. I mean, my grandfather always told me, I can forgive anything. The one thing I wouldn't forgive is if you're lazy. And so the work ethic was like deeply, deeply ingrained in my family. And they always made me feel like everything was possible if you worked hard at it and if you poured your heart and soul into it.
You were the first one in your family to graduate from high school. I just want to linger on that for a moment. That's incredible.
The fishing industry was interesting in that they take enormous pride in what they do. And so that reminds me a lot of what I've seen with grocers in the industry right now, greeting every customer at the door. Like that reminded me of the pride that I saw in my family for a job well done, and making sure that the food was perfect and fresh. And so these are things that I take to heart, and I want my job to be excellent.
So how did you get to Silicon Valley, and how did you succeed, especially as a woman, where who have a much harder time succeeding in the technology industry?
So I got to Silicon Valley about 15 years ago. I started my career at eBay and then moved to Facebook and spent 10 years at Facebook. There were a lot of people who took bets on me, even though I didn't look on paper that I was the perfect person for the job. But I had enormous grit and I worked very hard. And I think that really helped, carve a path. And here we are.
You rose up through the ranks, working in almost every corner of the business. You became one of Mark Zuckerberg's top lieutenants in product. What did you learn there about what to do and what not to do as a leader?
Yeah. Watching Mark operate for 10 years was kind of one of the best CEO schools you can ever imagine, because the thing he does incredibly well is that he thinks ahead, he thinks long term, and he tries to balance out the execution in the short term with a very long term view. I also learned that you need to be proactive when there's risks in your business, and we've seen that with Facebook.
Mark Zuckerberg may be one of the most scrutinized, most criticized founders ever. Facebook, now Meta, is one of the most criticized companies ever. Is that warranted?
I think the scrutiny is warranted because they have such, tremendous impact on the world. However, when people talk about Facebook, they expect very easy answers to very complex problems. And if you look at all of the problems that Facebook is facing, whether it's content moderation, whether it's policy, antitrust, these problems do not have easy answers. They require a lot of nuance, a lot of understanding.
I imagine Mark tried really hard to get you to stay.
Well, I really wasn't expecting to leave Facebook last year. I was always the person who marked, I'm going to stay for 10 plus years in the annual company survey. And I joined the board of Instacart really to learn more about a different industry and take my skills and apply them somewhere else. And I kind of fell in love with the company. I fell in love with the opportunity. And for Mark, obviously, we had a long conversation about this over the course of many weeks, but ultimately he understood that I wanted to spread my wings.
How did Apoorva Mehta, the founder of Instacart, approach you? And when did CEO become the ask?
I think Apoorva, to his credit, and that's really hard for a founder to do, started to realize that, given my skill set, I might be better positioned to go execute on that vision than he would. And so, during this conversation, it became clear that, my vision was actually quite different from his, but he was excited to see what could happen with mine.